Welcome to AppleKnows channel. I am Apple, and today I am going to take you to the coldest, most mysterious, and almost alien place on Earth. Antarctica is not just ice and penguins, it is a world of secrets that sound so unbelievable you may think I am making them up, but everything you will hear is 100% real. Let's start with something that still shocks scientists. The coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth happened in Antarctica, minus 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit, that is minus 89.2 Celsius. At that point metal snaps like glass, your breath can freeze instantly, and a human could not survive even minutes outside without protection. But here's the twist, even though it is the coldest place, it is also technically the largest desert on Earth, because it gets less precipitation than the Sahara. Imagine calling a land of endless ice a desert, yet that is the scientific truth. Now, you might think Antarctica is just white ice everywhere, but beneath that ice lies a hidden world. Under more than 2 miles of frozen surface there are lakes that have been sealed off from the atmosphere for millions of years. One of them is Lake Vostok, one of the largest subglacial lakes on the planet. Scientists drilled into it and discovered microbial life forms that evolved in total isolation, possibly for 20 million years. This is not science fiction, it is real, and it makes researchers wonder if life might also exist in frozen oceans on other planets, like Jupiter's moon Europa. And while we are talking about what lies below, Antarctica hides an entire mountain range under the ice called the Gamburtsev Mountains. They are the size of the Alps, yet completely invisible, buried under ice. Imagine mountains as high as the Alps and no one can see them. It is like a second continent hidden inside the first. But here is something even more disturbing. The ice in Antarctica holds about 70% of all the fresh water on Earth. If all of it melted, global sea levels would rise by around 200 feet. That would drown every coastal city on Earth, from New York to London to Shanghai. Scientists say parts of the ice sheet are already unstable. It is like the world's biggest time bomb of water. And it gets weirder. Antarctica has places called the dry valleys, where no rain has fallen for almost 2 million years. The ground there is so dry it looks like Mars, and NASA actually trains astronauts there for missions to other planets. You could stand in those valleys and feel like you are not on Earth anymore. But one of the strangest sights in Antarctica is something called blood falls. Imagine a glacier pouring out red liquid, like blood streaming from the ice. It is not actual blood, of course, but iron-rich saltwater that has been trapped under the glacier for ages. When it touches the air, it oxidizes and turns bright red. It looks terrifying, like the ice itself is bleeding. And speaking of strange, Antarctica is also the windiest place on Earth. The katabatic winds can reach speeds over 200 miles per hour, faster than most hurricanes. Imagine a wind so powerful it can pick up chunks of ice and throw them like bullets. Even stranger is the fact that thousands of meteorites have been found in Antarctica. Because of the contrast between dark space rocks and white ice, they are easier to spot there than anywhere else on Earth. Some of these meteorites are older than Earth itself, pieces of the early solar system just lying on the ice, waiting to be found. And here is a fact that many people never expect: Antarctica is the only continent with no permanent human population. Countries run research stations there, but no one is born there to stay, and there are no cities. It is the only place on Earth that belongs to everyone and no one at the same time, ruled not by countries but by an international treaty that bans military activity, nuclear testing, and even mining. It is a place reserved only for science and peace. Imagine this: there are waterfalls in Antarctica that never freeze, even when the temperature around them is colder than any freezer on Earth. This is because of hypersaline water, salt so concentrated it resists freezing. One example is Don Juan Pond, a body of water with salinity so high it remains liquid at minus 50 degrees Celsius. It is one of the saltiest bodies of water on Earth, and it might hold clues about how life could survive on Mars. Now let's step into the magnetic mystery. In East Antarctica lies a gigantic gravitational anomaly known as the Wilkes Land Crater. Satellite data suggests it may be the site of a massive asteroid impact about 250 kilometers wide, possibly linked to one of Earth's great extinction events. Beneath 2 miles of ice sits a scar that could have changed the entire history of life on Earth. It is buried so deep that we are still not fully sure what's down there, and that makes it even more haunting. And speaking of haunting, here's a chilling fact: Antarctica has active volcanoes under its ice. Mount Erebus is one of the southernmost active volcanoes on Earth, and it constantly releases plumes of gas. Even stranger, inside it there is a permanent lake of molten lava. Just think about that, a lake of fire in the middle of the coldest place on Earth. Scientists believe there are even more volcanoes hidden beneath the ice sheet, quietly shaping the continent from below. Another unbelievable truth is that Antarctica has its own ghost rivers. Beneath the ice are vast networks of liquid water flowing in the dark, stretching for hundreds of miles. These rivers move slowly but steadily, carrying water from the ice sheet to the ocean. They are invisible from above, but they are one of the reasons scientists fear rapid ice collapse in the future. But let's not forget about the skies over Antarctica. This is the best place on Earth to see phenomena like the aurora australis, the southern lights. The colors ripple across the frozen landscape, green, purple, red, like the planet is alive and breathing. On the other hand, during winter Antarctica spends months in complete darkness. Imagine not seeing the sunrise for half a year. Then, when summer comes, the sun never sets, it stays above the horizon for months, circling endlessly. It is a world where the concept of day and night breaks down completely. And here is something few people know: Antarctica was not always frozen. Millions of years ago, it was covered in forests, with rivers, lakes, and even dinosaurs roaming the land. Scientists have found fossils of tropical plants and even giant reptiles. If you could time travel back, you would not see endless ice, but a green, humid land that looked closer to New Zealand or South America than the frozen desert we know today. Even the creatures that live there now are surprising. Emperor penguins, for example, are the only animals that can survive the brutal Antarctic winter on land. They huddle together in groups of thousands, rotating positions so each penguin spends time in the warm center and then moves to the cold edge. This cooperation is the only reason they survive temperatures of -60°C with winds that could strip skin from bone. And then there are the secrets of the ocean surrounding Antarctica. Beneath the ice shelves live creatures that look like they come from science fiction: enormous sponges, icefish with transparent blood, and giant squid that can grow longer than a bus. The Southern Ocean is still largely unexplored, and every expedition brings up new and bizarre species that seem impossible on our planet. What makes all this even stranger is that Antarctica is also home to a place where compasses can go wild. The South Magnetic Pole is constantly moving, shifting position as Earth's magnetic field changes. Navigating here is a challenge, and sometimes compasses point in unexpected directions. One of the most jaw-dropping discoveries comes from the idea of ancient life trapped in ice. Scientists have drilled into cores of ice more than 2 miles deep, and what they hold is like a time capsule. These layers of ice contain tiny bubbles of ancient air, frozen for hundreds of thousands of years. By analyzing them, scientists can literally read Earth's climate history, seeing what the atmosphere was like long before humans ever existed. The oldest ice found so far is over 2.7 million years old, meaning Antarctica is holding the memory of our planet itself. But it gets even more eerie. Some researchers found bacteria and microbes in those ice cores that were still alive after being frozen for hundreds of thousands of years. Think about that: organisms surviving in suspended animation, waiting through ice ages, then waking up when scientists melt the ice in a lab. It makes you wonder what else is still sleeping under the frozen continent. Now here's another truth that shakes people: buried deep beneath Antarctica's ice, scientists found canyons larger than the Grand Canyon. One of them, the Bentley Subglacial Trench, is nearly 2,500 meters below sea level and hidden by miles of ice. If the ice melted away, you would see landscapes bigger and deeper than anything you could imagine, but they are invisible to the human eye. And while we are talking about hidden worlds, let's not ignore the fact that Antarctica is home to something called the Southern Pole of Inaccessibility. This is the hardest place to reach on Earth, the farthest point from any coastline on the continent. At this pole stands a strange Soviet research station, abandoned decades ago, with a plastic bust of Lenin staring into the endless ice. That bust is still there today, a silent reminder of how unforgiving and surreal this continent can be. Another fact that blows people's minds: the ice of Antarctica actually sings. Scientists have recorded low-frequency vibrations, almost like eerie music, created by winds blowing across the ice sheets. You cannot hear it with your ears, but sensitive instruments pick it up, and the sound is haunting, as if the continent itself is humming a frozen song. And let's not forget about the strange rules of living there. Antarctica has no official time zones. At the research stations, some people keep the time of their home country, others use New Zealand time because flights usually come from there, and some just use coordinated universal time. Imagine being in a place where day and night are meaningless, and even time itself has no fixed order. But one of the hardest things to believe is how enormous Antarctica truly is. Most people think of it as a chunk of land at the bottom of the globe, but it is bigger than Europe and almost twice the size of Australia. Standing in the middle of it, you would feel like you were on another planet entirely. And here's a twist most people never expect: beneath the ice, there are signs of huge reserves of coal, oil, and even diamonds. In theory, Antarctica could be one of the richest continents in resources. But the Antarctic Treaty bans exploitation, protecting it from mining or drilling. For now, it remains untouched, but the idea that under all that frozen silence lie treasures of the Earth makes the place even more mysterious. In 2018, scientists drilling beneath almost a kilometer of ice made an unexpected discovery. They found a massive cavity under the Thwaites Glacier, big enough to fit the entire city of Manhattan. This hidden void was caused by melting ice, and it shocked researchers because it showed the glacier is collapsing much faster than expected. Thwaites is nicknamed the Doomsday Glacier, because if it melts completely, it could raise global sea levels by more than 3 feet on its own, triggering a chain reaction with other ice sheets. And that is not the only secret Antarctica holds about the future of the planet. The ice itself is shifting. Imagine entire chunks of icebergs the size of small countries breaking off and floating into the ocean. One of the largest ever recorded, known as Iceberg A68, broke free in 2017 and was bigger than the state of Delaware. These massive icebergs drift for years, altering ocean currents and ecosystems as they go. But not all of Antarctica's shocks are about ice. Consider this: satellites have detected strange high-energy particles shooting upward from the Antarctic ice, something physicists cannot fully explain. These particles defy current scientific theories, and some even suggest they might be evidence of new physics, forces or particles we do not yet understand. Antarctica, in this way, acts like a natural laboratory, revealing phenomena that bend the rules of science. Now let's go back in time again, because Antarctica hides fossils that prove it once had an entirely different face. Researchers uncovered the remains of a temperate rainforest buried under the ice, dating back over 90 million years. That means Antarctica once had trees, flowers, rivers, and a climate warmer than today's Germany. Standing on the ice now, it is almost impossible to imagine that penguins waddle where once giant lizards and lush greenery thrived. And speaking of the land beneath, scientists believe there is a massive network of volcanic activity still alive under Antarctica. Heat from these volcanoes creates pockets of liquid water, even in areas buried under miles of ice. Some experts think this geothermal activity may be playing a role in the accelerating melt of certain glaciers, a natural force that combines with climate change to make Antarctica one of the most unstable regions on Earth. Here's another unbelievable truth: the ice is not just cold and solid, it actually moves. Antarctica's ice sheets creep across the land like slow rivers, sometimes at speeds of several meters per day. When they break or shift suddenly, it creates booming sounds called icequakes, powerful enough to register on seismographs, almost like earthquakes inside the frozen continent. Even stranger, the continent has places where nature plays optical tricks. On certain clear nights, with the right light conditions, you can see something called the Fata Morgana, a mirage that makes distant icebergs look like floating cities or towering cliffs in the sky. Explorers once thought they were seeing castles of ice, but it was just the atmosphere bending light in eerie ways. And while people rarely think of it this way, Antarctica also has a history of human tragedy and heroism. Early explorers like Robert Falcon Scott and Ernest Shackleton risked their lives to reach the South Pole, fighting starvation, madness, and death in the most hostile environment on Earth. Their journals describe hallucinations, desperate marches through endless snow, and moments where they felt the continent itself was against them. Even today, living on Antarctica for research is not easy. Scientists face isolation, brutal cold, and months of darkness that test the limits of the human mind. Imagine standing on a continent where you can find evidence not only of Earth's past but also of outer space. Antarctica is one of the best places in the world to hunt for meteorites. Over 60% of all meteorites ever discovered on Earth were found there. The reason is simple yet mind-blowing: when dark space rocks fall onto the bright white ice, they are easy to spot, and the moving ice sheet slowly carries them into concentrated areas where they pile up. Among these finds are pieces of Mars and the Moon, literally fragments of other worlds just lying on the frozen ground. But it is not only rocks from space that make Antarctica otherworldly. Scientists drilling beneath the Filchner ice shelf in 2021 stumbled upon something no one expected. They discovered strange stationary creatures, sponges and other organisms, clinging to boulders under 900 meters of ice, in complete darkness. There is no sunlight, no obvious food source, and yet life thrives there. It is a clue that biology on Earth can exist in places we once thought impossible, and it strengthens the idea that life might survive under the icy crusts of moons like Europa and Enceladus. Another fact that bends the mind is how much of Antarctica is still unexplored. Even today, only about 2% of the continent has been thoroughly studied. The rest is an icy wilderness larger than the United States and Mexico combined, hiding mountains, lakes, and possibly ecosystems we have never seen. It is the closest thing to an undiscovered continent left on Earth. And here is something most people don't realize: Antarctica influences weather patterns across the globe. The powerful katabatic winds and the cold air masses spilling off the ice-shape ocean currents that regulate the planet's climate. Without Antarctica, weather systems as we know them would collapse. In fact, the melting of Antarctic ice is already changing ocean salinity and circulation, which may alter global weather in ways we are only beginning to understand. But the continent's extremity doesn't stop with climate. Antarctica also holds a strange legal and political status. No country owns it. Instead, it is governed by the Antarctic Treaty, signed by dozens of nations. This treaty bans military bases, weapons testing, and resource exploitation, making it the only place on Earth set aside purely for science and peace. Yet many experts quietly wonder how long that will last, because under its ice lie vast reserves of oil, coal, and minerals that one day could tempt nations to break that fragile agreement. And here's something surreal: in the heart of the Antarctic plateau, researchers have found the clearest skies on Earth, so stable and dry that astronomers dream of building giant telescopes there. It could be the best place on the planet to look at the stars, closer in quality to space itself than anywhere else on Earth. But one of the strangest truths might be about sound, or rather, silence. Antarctica is one of the quietest places on the planet. Step away from the wind, and there is nothing: no animals, no rustling trees, no human noise. Just an endless, crushing silence that explorers say feels almost alive, as if the continent is listening to you. It is the kind of silence that can make people hallucinate or feel like they are going mad. Consider this: under the ice lies one of the largest liquid water bodies on Earth, Lake Vostok, buried under 4 kilometers of ice. It has been sealed off from the surface for millions of years, untouched by sunlight, air, or humans. When scientists finally drilled into it, they found unique microorganisms that had adapted to total isolation, some unlike anything seen before. It's as if a separate branch of life had been evolving in complete secrecy. But Lake Vostok is only one of hundreds. Scientists now believe there are more than 400 subglacial lakes under Antarctica, many of which remain unexplored. Together they form hidden ecosystems and water systems flowing under the ice, connected like veins under the skin of the continent. Some experts even think these environments may hold organisms that could reshape our understanding of biology. And it is not just lakes. Beneath all that ice is land, and that land is scarred by canyons, mountains, and rifts larger than anything we see on the surface. One example is the Denman Glacier Canyon, which plunges deeper below sea level than any land-based point on Earth, over 3,500 meters. That's deeper than the Grand Canyon, and it's completely invisible, hidden beneath the frozen crust. Here's another truth that feels almost supernatural: in Antarctica, compasses become unreliable. Near the South Pole, they stop pointing north and spin unpredictably because the lines of Earth's magnetic field converge. For early explorers, this caused confusion and sometimes deadly mistakes, wandering in endless white with no sense of direction. Even today, modern navigation relies heavily on GPS instead of compasses down there. Now let's talk about animals, because the Southern Ocean around Antarctica is home to creatures as extreme as the continent itself. Take the colossal squid, an animal so massive that its eyes are the size of dinner plates, the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. It lives in the deep, dark waters and is so rarely seen that entire specimens are almost never found intact. This is not fiction, it is reality, hiding in the icy depths. And it's not just squid, there are fish with antifreeze proteins in their blood, literally evolved to keep their bodies from freezing solid in waters colder than ice. But Antarctica also has a strange and fragile side. The ozone hole above the continent, discovered in the 1980s, was one of the greatest environmental shocks in history. Human chemicals were tearing apart the atmosphere right above Antarctica, exposing the land to deadly ultraviolet radiation. The world united to ban those chemicals, and now the ozone hole is slowly healing. In a strange way, Antarctica forced humanity to work together to save the planet. Even the sky over Antarctica holds secrets. In 2006, scientists detected a strange and persistent low-frequency signal in the atmosphere above the ice, unlike anything found elsewhere. It's called the Antarctic hum, and while the leading theories connect it to wind and atmospheric waves, its exact cause is still debated. Imagine standing on a continent that literally hums with a voice of its own. And here is a haunting fact: Antarctica has places so cold that carbon dioxide itself can freeze out of the air. At those temperatures, the gas we exhale as breath doesn't just condense into frost, it can solidify. These are conditions close to what you'd expect on Mars, not Earth. Antarctica still has layers of truth that can shake your understanding of Earth. Picture this: some parts of the continent are warming faster than almost anywhere else on the planet. The Antarctic Peninsula, that thin finger of land pointing toward South America, has seen temperatures rise by nearly 3 degrees Celsius in just 50 years. That is about 5 times the global average. Whole colonies of penguins have vanished from regions they once thrived in, forced to move or die as ice retreats and ecosystems collapse. But in contrast, other parts of Antarctica are so cold and isolated they almost never change. In 2020, researchers measured a staggering -98.6 degrees Celsius on the East Antarctic Plateau, the lowest natural temperature ever recorded on Earth's surface. At that level, human skin would freeze solid in less than a second. Even metal and plastic materials used in research gear can shatter like glass in that environment. And while we're speaking of extremes, Antarctica also holds the record for some of the purest air and clearest water on the planet. The McMurdo Dry Valleys are so free of microbes and organic material that the environment has been compared to Mars. In fact, NASA uses these valleys to test instruments designed for future Mars missions, because the conditions are almost identical to what rovers will face. Imagine walking on Earth and feeling like you're already on another planet. Now let's talk about ice in a way that few imagine. The Antarctic ice sheet is so massive that it actually deforms Earth's crust. Its weight pushes the land beneath it downward, and if the ice were removed, the continent would literally rebound upward over thousands of years. That rebound would change global sea levels, reshape coastlines, and alter the rotation of the planet itself. Antarctica is not just sitting there, it is pressing down on Earth like a giant hand. Here's a fact that surprises many: buried under all that ice are traces of ancient rainforests, and not just from millions of years ago. Sediment samples reveal that as recently as 40 million years ago, Antarctica had palm trees. That's practically yesterday in geological time. The fossilized pollen and plant remains prove that the continent shifted from tropical paradise to frozen desert in a relatively short span, a reminder of how fragile climates can be. And Antarctica has more than just natural wonders, it holds human relics frozen in time. Abandoned explorer huts from the early 1900s still stand, preserved by the cold. Inside, you can find clothing, food, and tools almost unchanged after more than a century. In some huts, there are tins of biscuits, pieces of clothing, and even dead sled dogs, frozen exactly as they were left. It's like walking into a ghost story written in ice. The continent also produces one of the strangest phenomena on Earth: blue ice. These are regions where old snow gets compressed so tightly that air bubbles are squeezed out, leaving behind pure, crystal-clear ice that glows deep blue under the light. Standing on it feels like standing on a frozen sapphire. And these blue ice fields are not just beautiful, they are also where some of the most ancient meteorites are found, preserved perfectly in the frozen surface. But perhaps the most mind-bending reality is this: Antarctica is still one of the least understood places on Earth. We've mapped Mars more completely than we've mapped the ground beneath Antarctic ice. Satellites can see through space to distant galaxies, but there are still valleys, rivers, and lakes under Antarctica that we've never laid eyes on. It's a blind spot on our own planet, and it may hold discoveries that could rewrite everything we know about Earth's past, its climate, and even the boundaries of life. So this is where we close the journey through the frozen frontier. Antarctica is not just a white desert at the bottom of the map, it is the most extreme, most mysterious, and most important place on Earth. It holds the planet's past in its ice, it shapes the climate of the present, and it carries the fate of the future in its glaciers. From lakes sealed off for millions of years to mountains taller than the Alps buried in silence, from living fossils under the ice to meteorites older than our world, every fact about Antarctica stretches the imagination but remains undeniably real. Here on AppleKnows channel, I am Apple, and I hope you felt the awe and shock of this continent's truths, the kind of truths that remind us how little we truly know about our own planet. Antarctica is still keeping secrets, and maybe, just maybe, the biggest ones are yet to be discovered.